Now, another part of this that I think is interesting is the fact that, when you look at what Russia has been saying, their security concerns, it all comes back to NATO, right? This NATO alliance ever expanding right up to their doorstep. They are worried about Article 5. But when you look at what the US and what Europe are doing right now, not only do they have Kiev so propped up that it may as well be a NATO member, but then you also have Trump in his call with Zelensky this week. He proposes that, the US should just take ownership of Ukraine's power plants to ensure their long term security. So, not even let's take control of these until the war ends. It's, hey, we're going to be taking control of these long term. And this, of course, comes after Trump's deal of wanting to gain access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals. All of these should be a big red flag to Russia, right? Exactly the opposite of what they've been saying. They don't want, increased US occupation control, whatever you want to call it, in Ukraine. So how do you view the fact that Trump is even bringing something like this up at this point?
I think you hit the nail on the head. This is exactly a kind of a backdoor security guarantee coming from the United States, from the European countries. Even if it's not NATO per se, it's still a guarantee of Ukraine's security by NATO countries. How is that any different? And so when you get into not only the question of what the territorial arrangements will be, but what is the status of any rump Ukrainian state? Does it have a security guarantee in effect from NATO? And can even any assurances about neutrality and denazification be trusted? Again, there are a lot of very smart, goodwill people out there saying, well, yes, as long as they repudiate NATO membership and Ukraine will be formally neutral, they'll put that in their constitution. The North Atlantic Council will agree to that, and so on and so forth. Then the war can be over. No, not at all. You can't trust that. You can't trust these people at all. And again, I don't, people have talked about an Austrian model or a Finnish model from the first Cold War with the Soviet Union. I don't think that'll work anymore. And like I said, I don't want to mention names, but one name of a guest you did have on recently, Mark Sloboda, is the only one I've heard saying this is, and I agree, I don't see how Russia can trust in any any guarantees about the future, let's say, non-hostile status of Ukraine, as long as there's still a Ukrainian state. In other words, as long as there's still a Ukrainian state that is not, let's put it bluntly, a Russian satellite, I don't see how they can trust the Western powers not to meddle in that state and build it up in effect as a hostile force, what amounts to a NATO cat's paw, even if it's not formally part of NATO. They'll find some backdoor way, whether it's putting Americans in for rare earths or energy infrastructure or some other form that doesn't amount to the NATOizing of that state.
Yeah, and that's got to be the biggest concern, right, that Russia's dealing with right now. And then you bring in sort of the Trump aspect, whereas one
Mhm.
day he's like, you know what, we're ready to be done with Ukraine. That's not our war. The next day he's like, let's take over the power plants, right? Let's do this and that and take their rare earth minerals.